Hi. This is Senate Appropriations Committee. It's Wednesday, February 1st, and we apologize for the delay, but we were having technical difficulties with our connections here. So we are going to start our first testimony with the BAA request from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And we have at the end of the table Secretary Curley, who is here to present, and then you have staff as well. I don't know how you want to stage your testimony, so I'll leave that up to you. As we go forward, we do have this document that was provided in advance on VHIP, which is helpful to see what has been done. So maybe we should go, do you know everyone on the committee, Secretary?
We Senator Schilling, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, because we're in the same district, but yeah, nice to meet you.
Senator Perchlik is the vice chair, so he's a new member, but I'm not new to the Senate, and Senator Lyons.
Senator Lyons.
And the rest of us are returning, and the empty seat is, of course, for Senator Ruth, and he comes in as his schedule allows. So I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, great. For the record, I'm Lindsay Curley. I'm the Secretary of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and as you mentioned, I'm here to testify on our Budget Adjustment Act requests. And with me today, I have the Deputy Secretary, Dave Brooks, and the Housing Commissioner, Josh Hanford, and the Economic Development Commissioner, Joan Goldstein. And if it's all right with you, I'll just do a very high level of what our ask is, and then each of them can dive in a little deeper as you have questions with more detail. Most of our asks are technical corrections. We do have one dollar item ask, and that is related to the VHIP, which is the handout that you have in front of you. I'll take you through the 4 items that we have, and then, as I mentioned, we can go back and go into some more detail. So for the Vermont Housing Improvement Program, it's a $5 million ask. That is the $1 item that we're asking for at this point. And what we're asking for is, we have more demand than we have money for this program. We can continue to invest in this program and serve people and bring units online to house people. And this has been a very successful program for us. And again, I will let Commissioner Hanford take you into more of the detail of what we've been able to do with this program over the last couple of years. But with money right now, we can continue to meet the demand that we have. And as I mentioned, we are able to move people out of homelessness and put properties that are unable to pass inspection right now back online. And we feel very passionate that this is the right time to put the money in and keep this program going. The next item that we're looking for is in the form of a technical correction. This is to the Brownfields program.
So that's to deal with the RPCs.
What's that?
The RPCs.
Yes. So correct. We have the we want to add language back in to direct $1 million to enable the RPCs to do assessments, as well as we want notwithstanding language to go back in that removes the cap on assessments and cleanup that will enable us to address bigger projects. And for those of you that may not know about this, we have this particular Brownfields program. A couple of years ago, the legislature allocated $25 million general fund money that enabled us in the Agency of Natural Resources to continue work on cleaning up properties that were not being used because they were contaminated. And there is a federal program, but there are certain circumstances where the federal program won't help us get these properties back online. So this program has been incredibly helpful. And again, I can let Commissioner Goldstein talk a bit about how many counties have utilized this program and how many properties have been brought
Probably not
online.
everyone. If you've had a dry cleaners, I'm sure.
Yeah, right, right. So that is the second one.
Now,
Yeah.
Secretary, I'm thinking the committee may not have the same background about the brownfields and the RPC relationship.
Sure.
As some of us who were part of that back and forth communication after we adjourned last year. But in prior brownfields appropriation, we had allocated a certain amount to go to the RPCs because they work with towns, municipalities to do the assessments. And the way the money got put in last year, and it came over from the House this way, and we funded the brownfields here, not in the money that we gave to economic development to a portion. There was no provision for any of the funding to go to the RPCs. Secretary looked at the language and what we had for flexibility, and we got dueling legislative intent, and the Senate said, well, we certainly would have intended it, but the committee that would have liked it didn't actually deal with the appropriation, and the version that we had that came over from the House didn't have that provision. So what have here before us is a way of addressing what seems to be in the end what people would have liked, and that is to have some of the resources around brownfields assessment go to the RPCs.
Right, so there was money that.
So I just want to make sure that that's an accurate portrayal. I know you had emails from, and I guess Commissioner Goldstein did too, from our Senate Economic Development, who thought that money should have been there and it wasn't. And
there was money that was available for assessments, and it was accessible through the Agency of Natural Resources, but it was different than had been previously done. And so there was a disconnect there and a desire to put it back the way it was the first time around. If you're okay, I'll let Commissioner Goldstein sign onto the record and explain a little bit further, because she has a little more of the detail and can give you some color on this.
Okay.
Commissioner?
Thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Joan Goldstein for the record. Yeah, exactly right, Chairwoman Kitchell. The way you've represented that is correct. 2 years ago with the appropriation, we were expressly stated to subgrant $1 million to the RPCs for the purposes of assessment of these properties. But last year, that language was not accompanying the $6 million appropriation. So this budget adjustment request is to do that express subgranting of $1 million to the RPC so they could conduct or get people to do the assessments. And just to refresh everyone's memory, the assessment is where it all kind of begins. There's a property, we don't know what the contamination is. They do the assessment, it identifies it. And then once they put forward a corrective action plan, that's when the property becomes eligible for our cleanup money. So it's very important that this is the first step towards cleanup.
So any questions other than why we have the proposal in front of us? It's to make that connection that somehow inadvertently got disconnected. And it wasn't the agency's fault. It wasn't that they didn't want to support the RPC's work. It's just they didn't have the authority to do it. So we can move on then.
Okay, great. Okay. And then the third ask in the for BAA would be the tax credit language. So so in our downtown and village tax center credit program, the tax center credit has always been a tax expenditure, not a grant program. And last session, the way this was done in the language, it was given to us in an appropriation, and our department is unable to use it as an appropriation. So what we are here looking for is to have that language put back in the sense of making sure that it is a tax expenditure and not an appropriation to us. And really, again, Commissioner Hanford can talk more detail about this, but we are anxious to get this done now because generally at this point in time, we would have been, these tax credits would have been happening and being doled out by now. So we want to get this going so that we can get this. This is really important because it's targeted for neighborhood development so that we could get more housing going as a result. So it sounds like it was inadvertently done in the Ways and Means Committee.
I don't know, grants are usually self-contained, tax credits are ongoing.
Correct.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and, yeah, while we're at it, do you want to have him clarify on?
Sure.
Sure. So for record, Josh Stanford, Commissioner of Housing and Community Development. This was for the increase last year, which was a one-time pilot increase. And the increase allowed us to allow tax credits to be used in neighborhood development areas, which is a planning designation that a community has gone through. It has to be attached to other types of smart growth designations like a downtown or a village center or a new town center. It's sort of a careful look at where neighborhoods already are, where maybe there should be more density allowed. And this tax credit was to allow this increase to be used in those areas for 2 years as a pilot. But somehow in the melee of all the work that was going on last year, time limited. And so we have been able to do the regular tax credits, but the bump we received last year, we haven't been able to use yet because it's an appropriation. We would have had to stand up a whole new grant program with rule making. And
how much was the appropriation that we did?
It was 2 million.
2 million. 245.
245, yeah.
245.
Thank you. And as the House has taken action, and could you just confirm, does the budget adjustment as they're quoted out include the language?
Yes,
You're asking.
it does. The House Appropriations Committee supported, I know from my areas at least, the VHIP ask, this tax credit fix, and the municipal planning and bylaw fix as well. That's the third piece in my bucket that it was simply it should be a may and it was a shall.
I didn't say space. That's the new thing in my space.
Oh.
Or it used to be wheelhouse. I can hardly wait for the next, and it's not orientation.
We're using buckets a lot now too, but.
We use buckets here a lot, and it's not orientation, it's onboarding. I love all the new terminology that's coming our way. So yes, we use buckets a lot, but so you want to go on unless there are questions about the tax credit appropriation.
It may, the language in the House, Ways and Means changed it a little bit, and it may just need a little tweak just because it's a mix of one-time and ongoing underlying base, just to make clarity about the one-time piece of it, but it's not.
But they
it's
supported
very,
the
everyone,
intent.
yes, the
Yeah,
intent
okay.
is very
The
clear.
intent is the same, but they did tweak our language a little bit.
Oh,
We think it works.
But I
I
guess
think it may
maybe
need,
joint forces with
I
us.
just think it might need a
Yeah.
concerted
need a
tweak for
little
the
more
one-time
tweaking.
piece.
And we do reserve our right to tweak. Oh, okay. My tenant is telling me he wants to bring me my check.
Well, that's.
Yeah.
I would leave immediately.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Friday afternoon, I got a text saying he's out of fuel. So, okay, so we'll look at that and probably have the language and then review it with you to
We
make
would
sure.
absolutely have our council look at it.
All right.
And then I'll go
Of the
through the
bylaws.
last one on the, municipal planning grants. So last year we were grateful to get a bump of $650,000 for a program that is intended to help with bylaw modernization and planning grants. This program is oversubscribed. It's been incredibly successful. However, the language did not allow for both bylaw modernization and planning grants. As I understand, it was a shall, it should have been a may. And so again, we're looking for a technical correction here to make sure that it can be used for both. And again, Commissioner, you can elaborate if I'm missing a piece of that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We've been fortunate to have 2 years of extra money to help with municipal bylaws to be more pro-housing development in smart areas.
Haven't we funded some of that already?
We have, but this year's money, we have not been able to fund the traditional municipal planning grants because it directs us to use all of this for bylaw modernization. And so typically by this time, we would have already responded to communities across the state asking for planning grants of the municipal nature for all sorts of things. And this language is preventing us from moving that money to the communities.
Which they normally.
We already have grant applications in and are selecting them at this point. So it's also very timely.
All right, so that is the shall to may.
So I suspect you may want to hear a little bit about VHIP or Eli. You've got the handout, and I think that Commissioner Hanford can go through that with you. And then, again, as you know, Commissioner Goldstein's on the line, and I'm not sure, Deputy Secretary, whether you have anything that you want to add. But so would you like to talk about VHIP or a little more on brownfields or something else?
I don't know. I will see what the committee wants to do.
The scale, the house budget as well,
The bill to scale.
the Northeast Kingdom piece.
Oh, yes. Oh, that was from Representative Marcotte.
Okay.
And that was the grant that would to match. And that was for the working with Due North and was it was the 350,000 that got added. And it was to be a match for a much larger grant. It was just a portion of the match that was necessary. And it's to really look at the whole broadband infrastructure and the support for the economy and working with Due North, NBU, and NVDA for that entire Northeast Kingdom region. And it was done in partnership with the Center on Rural Innovation. And so that came in, that request came in after the governor put together his budget proposal. I asked Representative Marcotte to take the testimony in terms of what the request was, the nature, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, no,
So I don't know who's the best person to speak to, but what this would do is draw down a considerable amount to get the match to really undertake this work. So Commissioner Goldstein, you're the person to respond.
Yeah, sure. We put in a $350,000 ask in the big bill, and the people who are applying have come into House to say, no, they really need it earlier. And that's the reason for their ask to have it in BAA as opposed to the big bill.
And so it's a timing issue in terms of when the money's necessary.
Right.
Not something that you weren't aware of originally. It's just where the request got BAA.
Yeah, it's hard to judge when EDA puts out the requisition for or notice of funding opportunity. I think last year it actually came in June, but I understand the need to be safe, that they want to make sure that they have this in hand. So that's the reason why it's being asked to go into BAA.
And I've got some more information about it, but we can talk about it a bit more, but it's really to get this grant. And I do have an email here that I can share from the director of NVDA, Dave Snedeker, but Commerce took testimony.
Isn't it to assist in a matching grant?
Yeah, I think the total is like 600, 650. So other entities are putting forward part of the match. This is just to get the full match that would be required to draw down the money. And I probably have it in one of my folders, but we can go into greater detail than right now. I can share that with you in terms of what the grant would do, but it's certainly to build on our infrastructure. And it's really, I guess it's one of those examples where you're making investments in a very targeted geographical area where there's a demonstrated need in terms of the economy. I would say, Senator Sears, the Northeast Kingdom has a very strong identity and in some ways works together very much as a region. I recognize that in fact you feel that Bennington Rutland is a forgotten kingdom, but we would do probably the Chittenden County is a universal donor, and so we'll give you some more background in terms of what the grant is designed to do, and I have that information in the folder here. And we can have more testimony if people feel they want it, but it's associated with a fairly significant grant. Do you remember the total grant, Joan?
I think it was 750,000 is what I recollect.
7.
So it was, you mean it's a 50-50 match?
I just have to check on one thing, so bear with me while I look that up.
Who's the grant? Who's the grant?
EDA.
It's EDA.
Yeah.
We did something similar last year with Rutland, Springfield, and Randolph. It was
Yeah.
a similar build to scale, and so.
So other areas have had the benefit of, and we've funded the match in the past. This is just a different region of the state that these would benefit from this funding. So,
I don't have a problem.
well, of course you wouldn't. You're from the Northeast Kingdom.
Oh, I thought you said it was in Bennington County.
No, no. I said Bennington.
Commiserating with
Bennington's being
I'm
left out.
glad I said I don't have a problem.
Yeah.
Senator Bruce and I are donating everything.
Well, yeah, you guys have always been.
You're very generous.
Very generous.
Job engine of the state.
Well, it's all right. Joan, don't worry. I'll extract it from one of my folders and
Okay.
if people have more questions, but this is just another region having the benefit of this federal money. Okay, anything else that got added that maybe since the governor's proposed? Is that it? I think that's it. Okay. All right, so why don't we hear more about VHIP?
Right.
Why don't you sit next to
Are you on?
Hold on.
Because it does seem like one of the things here is it can bring housing units online really quickly.
Right, exactly. And just, a quick history, sort of piloted this concept years ago before we had all this federal money. We were using some of our federal community development block grant money, piloted in Rutland and in Bennington. And
The Forgotten Kingdom.
Yes.
found out that it worked. Landlords were willing to take a little incentive in exchange for guaranteeing affordable rents in a safe, decent place. And also there was available housing units. I think what's lost is right before the pandemic hit, we had just completed our 5-year housing needs assessment in order to draw down all the state's federal housing funding from HUD, which goes to the Department of Housing and Community Development, some to VHCB and other entities. We have to do a housing needs assessment. And in that assessment, one, it showed before the pandemic, we needed about 5,800 new units of housing to try to bring some sort of availability in the market because vacancy rates were so low and costs were increasing already then. But two, it demonstrated that we had about 19,000 units of housing in the state that were of poor quality, likely not to meet code, likely to be abandoned or vacant. And so it really seemed like low-hanging fruit to when we got into this housing crisis, like the Yankee Vermont way of let's fix what we have first before we start building new, when we had all this available housing stock. And so that's sort of the history behind it. Also, there was an executive director of a homeless shelter years ago that every time you try to rehouse a family from a shelter, they had a housing voucher to pay 70% of rent. You'd go to apartment after apartment and they wouldn't pass code. So back to the shelter. Typically the newer affordable housing units we build, those have no vacancies because they're such quality housing at affordable rates. But there's privately owned that are in poor shape. And he was just frustrated with the system that we had.
Now
and
you
said,
can have the voucher and you can't find a rent for the maximum amount.
exactly, that's becoming a problem because of scarcity and there isn't competition. So that really pushed from the homeless provider perspective that there's an untapped housing resource out there, but we just need to put some money into the hands to bring these units up to code with a commitment that they serve the people that need the help. So that was the genesis behind it. We started it with CRF money right out of the gate when COVID first hit. It wasn't even called VHIT back then. Then there was a little bump in funding before the statute was even codified that kind of created a little kerfuffle. But we were able to bring units online. And what we found since then is for an average cost so far of $31,000 per unit, we've been able to bring on 408 units. Over 300 of those are serving families that exited homelessness in every county in the state. And there's tremendous demand. There's still landlords, property owners that are asking for this funding and this support. And so it's as simple as we still have this housing crisis. We feel like this is a good solution to put some more money in this fiscal year rather than stopping and waiting till the new fiscal year starts again. We've been kind of operating this program on little start, stop, and been very conservative of how we sort of doled out the money. And so if we had this $5 million in this fiscal year, we could put it out the door, obligate it. And these units take like about 6 months to get online.
You'd start much earlier.
Right.
So you've obligated all the funding that we
Yes.
put in the budget.
Yes.
And
It's not all expended, but it's obligated in
Yeah.
demands and pipeline.
yeah, so my next question is, in the 24 budget, is there additional money?
There is.
How
There is.
much?
15 million.
50. And the other question I have is we've been looking at certainly the quality of housing stock and energy costs, heating, weatherization, et cetera. When we're doing these units, is that part of what you're looking at, is to make sure that they're more energy efficient in terms of, the heating type or source, or, many of them, we have so much old housing stock, and it's kind of air castles. I kind of live in one. I don't think I'm ever going to die of carbon monoxide poisoning because I have so much leakage, but yeah, but so I was just wondering the extent to which we're able to kind of meld two kind of goals that we have.
Absolutely. And let me just explain the $50,000 cap, because at first it was 30. And then last year when we started to see the success of this program, we had a lot of folks from the New American community, the refugee community, the state director saying they were having an incredibly hard time finding 3 and 4 bedroom apartments, even in the new buildings. Because if you're going to build a new 30, 40 unit apartment building, you have to get a market study, you have to get financing. It's always going to say build 1 and 2 bedroom units, where the most market need is. So they're not being built. Yet we have this large old housing stock that has this structure that exists. So you only get $50,000 if you create 3 or more bedroom apartments. So it's capped at $30,000 for 2 bedrooms or less, or if you're building a brand new apartment, not just reconfiguring an existing property, but building an accessory dwelling unit, a new structure attached to an existing property. One of the limits on this program is it can only work in properties that already exist. This doesn't allow us to build a new structure.
But there are other programs, isn't it?
There's others, and there's another issue with this program right now, which I think there's a few legislators introducing bills to provide this flexibility. We can't use this money in a property that already has a tenant that has not passed code and could be facing eviction because it's not a safe place. We think that'd be a smart way to add the flexibility, because I hear from both tenants and landlords that they know that it's unsafe housing and it's going to cost $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 to make those improvements, bring it up to code. And currently we can't, this has to be at least vacant for 90 days to be eligible. So that's just something to put out there, that there are a few legislators that have introduced bills to allow that. Of course, there'd be an anti-displacement plan, you'd have to, ensure the tenant was properly housed while the work was being done. And then of course, the value of this is they're committed to affordable rents for 10 years. So it's not like what could exist if we don't solve this solution is someone evicts someone, fixes all it up, and then the rents are twice as high and now it's not available. So this would prevent, is a possible solution to prevent that.
So how much prescriptive language do we have in statute around this program?
It's pretty prescriptive.
It's
Yeah, in fact, to get to your first question, the weatherization, it specifically calls out that weatherization is eligible and encouraged. And we have regular meetings with OEO, Office of Weatherization, trying to bring those resources into these properties when the timing works. often some of these private owners are moving very fast. And we, with 2,000 plus, folks still in hotels and motels, we don't want to stop the project because we need to wait for weatherization, but we have made it work. We have matched, we have ongoing coordination meetings, as well as ADA work. This is a time too to meet the needs of folks with disabilities, to bring that into these properties. And I think there's some other bills floating around that.
So the Senate Commerce Committee has been working on a housing bill. Seems like a logical place to.
Yep, those VHIP enhancements, technical corrections are in that bill, as well as a House bill.
In the House bill. Okay, because I think our Senate committee plans on getting that out fairly soon. So, I guess we don't need to do that in the budget. Budget's more in the budget.
No, and I think we had an internal discussion that this 5 million could be spent with the existing rules we have, with the priority to move people out of homelessness, because there are still property owners willing to do that this way. We have this crisis. We have a commitment to our AHS partners and homeless providers that this program has been a big part of the solution of moving folks out. And while folks are still willing to do that, we don't need the policy changes in BAA to have that discussion. We can deal with that through the rest of the year. Yeah.
Okay. Senator Lyons.
So as you're looking at this, and obviously taking people out of homelessness is really important and critical. We've been through that recently. But the other areas of concern are for folks who are sort of have mental health issues, maybe need subacute care, for folks who could use some peer support services and housing
first
Yeah,
populations.
yeah, the whole housing first population. So is there any dialogue or thinking going on about that? That takes some time to fit up and set up and everything else, but we're hearing about more and more
Sure.
in the community.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about this and all the new affordable housing dedicated to folks exiting homelessness, we've all agreed to the coordinated entry system. So, you can see that we're working with nonprofit housing providers, developers to cover a region. They work with the landlord, oversee the grant, make sure the work was done, disperse it upon reimbursement, and they help manage this coordinated entry referral. So the homeless provider in the region refers families to the property off this list, so everyone has a fair shot. And some properties, if it's down a dirt road, it might not serve someone if they can't get access to services. But fortunately, we have more services than we have in the past. We have more rental assistance. Often someone exiting homelessness, they need a voucher in order to afford this rent. So there's a lot of coordination that goes on with this program. There's more that could happen. And it will be the right solution in some cases, but not all of them. Is this the right setting for someone that maybe has some more acute needs, and maybe there's more of a supportive housing situation that they should be placed in? But we deal with all those with this program.
Other questions? Andy, did you have a question?
So, well, maybe I found the answer on your website. So there's the 30 and 50,000 caps, and then there's also a percentage.
The property owners have to match 20% at least minimum. We're finding the match is usually a lot higher than that. One of the questions we were actually asked,
Because the projects are higher.
it's expensive, everything is rising. The House Appropriations said, do you want us to raise the match? I mean, you want us to raise the $50,000 cap? And
Yeah, but then without.
there's a balance
amount of
between the
money.
public investment and how many years of affordability we're getting. And just to be clear, this is either a 5-year commitment for families exiting homelessness or refugee resettlement, or a 10-year commitment serving families below 80% AMI. And so that's what we're buying with this investment, up to $50,000 with an average cost per date of 31. So I think, our partners think, the landlords think that this is a fair exchange of public investment to receive that affordability commitment.
So Senator Starr and then Senator Wilson.
Yeah, I'm wondering, did you have the people that have to move out, have you got that straightened out in this proposal? the place has to be empty for
Oh,
3.
so in the Senate Economic Development Housing Bill and in the Rural Caucus or Representative Sims bill, they have a series of VHIP technical corrections and enhancement that allows us to serve properties that don't meet code but are currently occupied.
Yeah. But that, what's guaranteed that that's gonna pass?
Us, and if you really want to, if in the end, if it's not, if something should happen against derailed, we can always put the language in the budget.
Because it's, you know, it's crazy not, people are already there, that's their home. You know, they could move out for a month or whatever it takes to rehab and then back in, but to say it's gotta be empty for 3 months
So that's why, I guess they're saying
Yeah.
it does.
should be.
And we would strongly support that, you know, this program, the very first CRF money, we allowed that because we had no rules. It was just like help people. And we kept people housed during the pandemic because they were in unsafe housing and we were able to fix it up. The last 2 years, we've not been able to deploy that option because the statute requires it to be vacant, abandoned. It was meant as a new production program to use our vacant stock, you know, but we've learned that we could also save people from possibly being homeless in the crisis that brings by using this to help existing
Well, the
tenants.
other part of that is usually those tenants, they're in substandard are paying lower rent. And if it's all rehabbed and they move into a nice place and the rent only goes up a little.
Do you have some provision on?
We would have
that?
provisions
Yeah.
in the language that doesn't allow them to, they still need to rent
I
at the
think that's-
affordable rate. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think
so
that's Senator Starr's concern.
Yeah.
it protects
Yeah,
that.
it protects the tenant.
And it gives the landlord a longevity
Right.
guaranteed amount.
I know Senator Westman has a question, and then after that, I wanted to ask, you're asking for 5 million more in the BAA, and then 15 in the big bill. How many units is your estimate then? You said so far, 408 have come
Yeah.
online. What do you think this would buy us in terms of additional units?
Yeah, so if that
A lot
cost stays
depends.
31,000, I think it's gonna keep creeping up.
I do too.
And we're gonna be close to $50,000 per unit, so you can, you know, whatever the number is, this is scalable. And this 408, we'll have more than this. That's just what's been done to date.
Yeah,
We
I
still
see you
have,
got more obligated.
yeah, yeah. And I'm hoping there's some more in Lamoille County. You've probably noticed that, Senator. You know, and I think that, you know, working with the organization that covers that region to try to help them with extra outreach or whatnot, you know, is a strategy that's worked.
Well, rural housing has been usually pretty.
Well, Lamoille Housing, the problem is Lamoille Housing Partnership just does development. They don't operate a homeownership center and do
Oh,
this. So Down Street Housing and Community Development covers Lamoille County as well. And I think one of the improvements we could see, because this is the first time we're moving to general funds, this has all been federal funds, is we'll be able to have a little bit more flexibility in supporting the organizations, do a better job of serving regions. And so I'm hopeful that we can have a little bit greater uptake in some of these counties, although it's pretty impressive to have 5 units in Essex County. This is the only program I'm
Probably
aware of.
all in Island Pond.
Lunenburg, we had, I think, one in Lunenburg.
Oh, Gilman.
Yeah, this is the only housing program I'm aware of in the pandemic that has had new units created in every county in the state.
Well, the head of Rural Edge lives in Essex County.
Yes,
So,
Patrick.
Patrick. So I'm sure he has.
As well as Grand Isle. It's very rare we see new units in Grand Isle that are affordable. You know, and this is using existing structures, so we can get them done quicker than building new.
So your estimate then?
Oh, sorry, I would need a calculator.
Oh, no, I didn't know. I just was something
Yeah.
off the.
Couple hundred.
Yeah, oh yeah, at least a
More
couple.
You get
Yeah.
50,000 into each unit.
Yeah, and then you've got
So
5 and 15, if that's in the big bill, that's 20 million more, so.
Average
Yeah.
of 5 million.
Yeah, so it's, you know, 100 from the 5 million, every,
Three.
so it's still the most efficient, when you consider what new housing is costing, even a 700-800 square foot apartment, new construction is over $400,000 per unit these days.
Let me tell you, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, we killed that out, right? St. J, Newport, all over the state.
not to say that's not needed as well, but this is a low-hanging fruit, cost-effective solution that moves quickly.
Plus it's
Close that.
the community.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
One, please.
The added
Yeah.
benefits of the neighborhood
Yeah.
is supported and grand list values go up, right?
It's the top one, I
It's
think.
amazing
Yeah,
what
there's the
people are
top.
converting, right? The horse barn we saw.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you.
it's very cool.
yeah, it helps the whole community.
Yeah, it does.
Right. And the stories are pretty impressive too, like the one in Newport City we visited.
Yeah,
Young lady that's in there that was out of homelessness that now works, has a great job, and it's sort of,
Changes their life.
Yeah.
Yes.
the horse barn converted all.
Well,
Yeah.
then if you got Sacred Heart converted to more apartments, that'll make quite a
Yeah, but
difference. too.
those are gonna be more than,
Yeah, of
more
course,
than
of
this.
course. Yes, this is true, but there's a lot of kind of large structures in some of the Vermont villages. So is that the end of your request?
that's the end of our financial request.
And, yeah, and like I said, if you have any more, I don't know, it looks like Commissioner's gone. I was gonna say, if you have any more on Brownfield, she's on, but I think she's gone, but I couldn't see her. She's here, okay.
No, she's still there.
Here she is.
I'm here.
Any questions on brownfields while we're,
Okay.
great.
And I just forwarded you the one pager on the bill to scale so that the committee has it.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a little after. And so, I think, my next question, I guess this is a committee, meeting, so we should do it publicly, is that correct? With NCSL, which is the National Council of State Legislatures. So, Erica is our Vermont, liaison or whatever, and so she's gonna come in at 2:30.